Hey guys, happy Wednesday. Today I want to talk a little bit about revision. Specifically, I want to talk about a little bit about style. So I mentioned style a while back, and I sort of said we want to think about style a little bit differently, but I haven't talked about it too much, so I wanted to tell you a few tips and tricks about it. So style is just the way that someone writes. There are all sorts of ways that people can write. People can write very casually, they can write very academically, they can write very formulaically, they can write very creatively, they can write very conversationally, or they can write, sometimes people write very confusingly or long-windedly. Like they use very long sentences and things like that. So there are many different styles, and some are more appropriate to different topics and audiences and purposes than others. But the style that you choose, or the style that you end up writing in, is going to influence how the ideas affect your reader or your audience. So when you're thinking about style, you want to think about what you want your audience to get. You want to think, who's your audience and what's your purpose? Who's going to hear this and what do you want them to get from it? What is your goal? So if I'm going to write a letter to a class of kindergartners about being nice at recess, I'm going to sound a lot different than if I'm going to write a letter to the superintendent talking about how middle schoolers should have recess. Like, yes, those are both about recess, but my audience is very different and my purpose is very different, so I'm going to have a different style. If I'm writing to kindergartners, I can't use a bunch of academic phrasing and, anecdotes that make no sense to them and a bunch of statistics that they're not going to understand. I'm going to have to be really careful about explaining any statistics I use and being very child friendly in my language. If I'm writing to the superintendent, I'm going to want to really sound like I know what I'm talking about because I'm writing to someone who's in charge of the whole school district. And I don't want her to think I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm definitely going to want to be a little bit more formal and a little bit more respectful because of who I'm sending it to. If I'm sending a letter to my friend, I can probably be pretty conversational because they're my friend. I probably don't need to write a super formal letter to my friend. If I'm giving a speech to my class, that might be relatively informal. But if I'm giving a speech to the college admissions board of the college I want to get into, that's going to need to be a lot more formal. So we're thinking of we want to think about what's appropriate for the audience that I'm using. There's also different levels of appropriateness for the topic that you're talking about. If you're talking about mental health, you probably want to be relatively formal. That doesn't mean you have to be so formal you never say anything, or you don't have any passion. You want to have passion, but you probably don't want to be making jokes in the middle of your very serious essay about mental health. If you're asking your mom to buy you a dog, you can probably throw some jokes in because you're asking your mom to buy you a dog, and that's a less serious argument. So you want to think about that. That's going to determine what kind of style you want to aim for. So there's a few different ways to revise for style to make sure you have the style that you want to have. So one way is to read your draft out loud. That's going to be a good way to catch what it sounds like, to figure out do I sound how I want to sound. If you want to sound like you know what you're talking about when you read your essay out loud, does it feel like you know what you're talking about, or does it not sound very confident? Because then you can change your style up a little to make it sound more confident. It is also super helpful if you can have someone else read your draft out loud to you, because the way someone else interprets what you wrote, they might say it in a way that's different than how you thought it in your head, and that might help you catch some things that don't fit in the style that you were going for. And then as you're writing, as you're revising, imagine yourself as a person closely related to your topic. So like imagine yourself as the person talking about this topic who is getting something done. Like hopefully you are doing that with your letter or your editorial or your documentary. Like hopefully you're already passionate about it and you are really invested. But if you happen not to be very invested, like imagine yourself as someone who is really invested in that topic. Imagine yourself as someone who it's really important that people hear this. If you're talking about climate change, imagine yourself as a scientist. How would a scientist say these things? What would they think was important? Why would those things be important? How would they phrase it? Would they sort of just say, well, it's probably a good idea to do this? Or would they be really like, we need to do this right now? Like, how would they talk about it? And that can help you think like, oh, this is how I could talk about it. Even if you are super passionate about it, think about how other people who are also super passionate about your topic might talk about it. That can help you get that passion across and get that style right for your argument. Other two things you can do, combine some of your short sentences and then separate some of your longer sentences. So you might have like a really long sentence, you could separate that. You might have a bunch of choppy short sentences, you could combine some of those. Flow is part of style. So combining sentences and separating sentences helps with the flow. You want a nice change in sentence structure throughout your writing. So you want it to kind of bounce and flow naturally. You don't want all really long sentences. You don't want all really short sentences. You want a nice flow. And then you can also focus a lot on word choice. Like easy things like changing be verbs, like is, are, was, were, to action verbs, or changing vague or kind of bland words to like things, stuff, very, to stronger and more precise words. Those right away can take your writing from sort of to really strong. So really thinking about your word choice. Obviously, some words just need to go there because that makes sense. Don't stress out about every is, are, and was. Some of them are going to need to be there. But you might consider like, oh, if I'm using this a lot, how could I make this sound better? If you read a paragraph and you're like, wow, that sounds really boring, how can you make it sound more passionate? How can you bring that style and voice into your writing more? Here's some examples. If you said something like, I think it's stupid to say video games are bad, there's a few things that I would probably change to make the style better for your argument. So it's probably not going to be the best for your argument to just say that you think something is stupid, because if someone in your audience thinks video games are bad, then you're just calling them stupid, and that's not going to get them to listen to you. They're just going to be like, this person insulted me and I don't ever want to speak to them again. It's also not great all the time to use like I think. Sometimes that works if you're going for a really casual topic or a more casual topic or a more personal topic. But if you're going for a broader topic or a broader audience, I think tends to sound like you don't know what you're talking about a little bit. It sounds like you're hedging rather than like saying things straight out. And then bad is just a very boring word. So it would be preferable to change it up a little. So I might change this if I were writing it to say, based on the evidence, it is unfounded to say that video games are only harmful. So instead of just saying, well, it's dumb, I'm saying, given all of the evidence that exists, it's inaccurate, it's unfounded to say that video games are only harmful because I can show you what the benefits are. So that, as you can tell, is a little bit more formal. I went kind of a formal route with my examples. A formal but passionate route. You can be formal and passionate at the same time. All right, next example, you might see something that says, like, the article said that many kids are addicted to video games. So, again, this is sort of simple. There are a few things like the article said feels a little childish. Like the way that phrase sounds, it sounds a little elementary-ish. And then many kids are is just kind of like a basic phrase. It doesn't feel very strong. It doesn't feel very specific. It feels like it could be more precise. So I might change that to, and I would need a source here, like according to the CDC, a large percentage of children in the U.S. deal with video game addiction. So rather than just saying, oh, some article, I'm saying who it actually was. And then instead of just many kids are, I'm saying a large percentage of children in this specific place deal with this. So that sort of ups my voice a little. It sounds a little stronger. I changed that R for deal with video game addiction rather than saying are addicted. And then last one, if I said something like, many people think video games are fun and helpful. If they didn't, it wouldn't be such a big industry. I might change that to something like, the remarkably popular video game industry provides fun and entertainment to the millions of people who play each day. So this is not quite saying the exact same thing, so it might not work to change it quite this much. I wanted to combine those two sentences. But it gets more at the point that, like, there are millions of people playing and it provides fun and entertainment. That could be part of my argument. The idea of saying, like, remarkably popular rather than just, like, oh, wouldn't be such a big industry. So I'm being more precise, more specific about what I'm trying to say. And I am trying to use stronger words when I can, when it makes sense to. So go through your writing today and look for some of these things. Try some of this. Read your draft out loud to, your mom or your dad or your sister or your dog or your snake. Just to hear it out loud. If you can, have someone read it to you and see what you hear when you listen to them read it out loud. Do you hear the style you were going for? Do you hear the passion you were aiming for? Or does it fall kind of flat when someone else reads it to you? And then really think about, like, can you change any of your word choice? Can you change your sentence structure at all to make that flow a little bit stronger? You want to turn your rough draft in today. It's a rough draft, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Again, for my documentary and speech people, that rough draft should be a script. You don't need to have anything recorded to turn in yet. If you have stuff recorded, great, but I just want your script for the rough draft, and then you have the next couple days to get that film made, while the rest of us are doing a little more editing and revising. All right, let me know what you need. If you are stuck, I am happy to help. Talk to you guys.